Hello and welcome to Read. Today I have a video that I am, I think, going to call One Day Reading Experiences. And the inspiration or the reason why I wanted to make this video, it's going to be a little bit rambly at the start talking about it. I promise I will get into talking about actual books, but so those of us who are on BookTube, either as creators or as viewers, I think it's fair to say that we've all come across the books you can read in a day video format. It's a tried and tested video type. I basically always watch it whenever a creator that I like makes that video, and even creators that I don't really know. Oftentimes, because of how popular those videos are, those are the ways that I get into or find out about a certain creator. And I thought about doing that. I was like, oh, okay, cool, easy video format. I can just grab a couple of books off my bookshelf, talk about them, and then, easy stonks, I'll get some views. But I came across a couple of roadblocks or just hurdles. There's two kind of big ones. And basically the first one was book length. So generally, I was thinking about what's an actual practical amount of pages that a person can read in a day. And there are some absolutely absurd recommendations that some people have given of books that are kind of up in the 250 300 page length. That is just, to be honest, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, yeah, you can read this book in a day, just read uninterrupted for 12 hours. And I'm like, what? That's not practical at all. It is practical if you're already a reader, but then that segues into the sort of second point, which is who are those videos for? When I make a video that says, here's 5 books that you can read in a day, it's sort of like, why do I want you to read a book in a day? Like, what am I getting out of it? And what are you getting out of it? Are you trying to just plus one quantity the amount of books that you have read, and therefore the amount of books that you have consumed, and therefore the amount of books that you possess, and so then you can move on with your life and you won't need to think about it again? You just get the quantitative satisfaction of saying, oh yeah, I just read this book and I read it in one day. But then also, is it a video? Is the reason for the videos I want to help establish a reading habit in you, and a good way to do that is to get the satisfaction of having completed a book in a day, since it doesn't take a big time commitment, which that's kind of what I wanted to do. But then I realized, if it's the latter, if that's what those videos are for, then I think it's frankly unreasonable to say, oh yeah, just binge this book for 12, 14 hours, which is how long a person at an average reading speed would need to read, a kind of 300-400 page book. And so I thought, okay, we're going to be practical about this. I'm going to assume that you are not a reader, but that you are interested in reading. You're kind of gravitating around books. You have an interest in learning, but you just haven't developed the habit of reading. I'm going to assume that you're working a full-time job, and that this is basically your daily schedule. You're going to go to work, you're going to come back home, kick off the bootstraps, you're going to sit down. It's a Friday night, so we're not worrying about waking up early on Saturday morning. You're going to order in some food, you're going to read, you get home maybe about 6 o'clock, you're going to read, have a little bit of a break, but basically we're going to try and read from 6 o'clock till around midnight, and factoring in about an hour break, we've got 5 hours of reading. I'm going to be generous and assume that we are reading 20 pages an hour, and so the hard limit is 100 pages. 100 pages is all we've got. Of course, if it's a weekend, you'll have more time to read. But again, coming back to this idea, if you're not a reader, you probably don't have the stamina to read for 12 hours straight. And I do really believe that, that's nothing wrong with you. It's not a sign of discipline or anything like that, or saying you're an undisciplined person. It just means you haven't developed the muscle of reading for long stretches, which is a muscle, and you can lose it. I know that even myself, if I spend a period really going back and working on something else, like working on music, or even back when I was playing video games, if I was binging video games for ages, I would lose the muscle of being able to read for long periods. And so you just got to work that back up. So those are the criteria: 100 pages. And then when I had implemented that criteria, I thought, okay, well, now I can start thinking about books. I go through my bookshelf thinking about books that are within that page limit, and there was basically like 3 or 4 books that I could recommend. And I was like, oh, I came back to that idea of thinking, what do we want to do? Why do we want to read a book in a day? And I thought, how about this? Instead of you read a book and you finish a book in a day, you are going to have a complete reading experience in a day. And what this means is that you're not going to finish the book, or maybe you'll finish the book. There's like a couple of examples here where it is the full book, but you're not going to finish the book. But if you read this and that's all you read in a day, you're going to be, I think, completely satisfied. It's going to be a complete reading experience. You don't have to ever come back to the book. If it's not your thing, you can move on. But if you do want to, the book is there. You can go and read it, but you don't need to have any obligation of smashing it out in a day. You don't need to think about it as a quantitative challenge, and you can just, I just want you to sort of read and have a full experience reading in a day, and then do it again the next day. Because again, and just some stories of me trying to get into reading, I came to reading very late because I was always kind of mentally and creatively committed to music until about my 20s. The times that I read before becoming a more consistent reader is I would always just like binge something, get hooked, and then move on. I would do the exact same thing that I was worried about these books in a day that you can read videos were kind of trying to inspire. So I don't want to do that. I want to inspire a slow but steady reading habit, and the way I think to do that is to just to feel nourished with an experience, even if it's not, you don't get the dopamine rush of having completed a whole book. Anyway, 7-minute preamble is over. Let's get started. I've got these subcategorized into fiction, poetry, and essays, and we'll just go through and I'll give some quick thoughts about them. A lot of these I have made videos talking specifically about the book on the channel, so for those I'll skip over, or I'll just be more vague. But anyway, let's get started. You can't live your life without having read a Borges short story. And so the 2 collections that I have here are Fictions by Borges and The Aleph and Other Stories. I recommend, like, the thing with Borges, I've talked about Borges probably 3 times on my channel now. I love him. And the channel Better Than Food book reviews, it got the name from sort of someone talking about Borges stories. Some stories that I recommend are, of course, The Aleph, the titular story. There's The Writing of the God. There's also The Library of Babel. I think the thing with Borges is that, and I know I've said this before, but you will spend an hour reading a story of his and you will spend your life thinking about them. What I like about that, obviously you're going to fit that within our daily schedule. If you read a Borges story and you didn't get it, you can either do one of 2 things. One, you can move on if you felt like, I just wasn't sort of interested in that. And you can kind of look and just quickly peruse some of his stories, maybe look up some summaries and see if there was another one that you're interested in. But also, if you were interested in it, but you feel like, I just didn't understand that, that's fine. Read it again. Like just go back and read it again. And that's a fun habit and a fun thing to do. When I made the video talking about Pierre Menard, just to get back into it, I think I read the story 4 times in a row just to try and really get some of the stuff that goes straight over your head because of how high of an intellectual level Borges is operating. Anyway, that's my first recommendation. You don't have to read the full collections. If you do want to read a full collection, I recommend reading the collection The Garden of Forking Paths, which is in Fictions. But yeah, so that's the first one. Next up instead of recommending the Dao De Jing by Lao Tzu, which is a book that you probably could read in a day. It's Taoist kind of poems, adages, etc. Instead, I'm going to recommend that you read random selections from the Book of Zhuangzi. And the Book of Zhuangzi, or Zhuangzi, the philosopher, is coming out of the Lao Tzu tradition, or the Taoist tradition, and instead of the fable, or instead of the poems and the aphorisms that are in the Tao Te Ching, Zhuangzi made stories and he wrote fables. And so there are some classic ones like the Dream of the Butterfly that I recommend, but really I would just say pick random stories. Just read any ones that you want within the amount of time that you have in a day, and it can be fun because there's obviously a Chinese mysticism or a Chinese spirituality coming from Taoists that is maybe a bit more palatable because it's contextualized into stories as opposed to kind of poems that if you were really committed to the philosophy or the religion, you would spend hours of your day meditating upon. But if you just want to read stories that have somewhat recurring characters and there is some poetry kind of interweaved into it, I think just reading from the Book of Zhuangzi. He was fiercely opposed to Confucius and Confucian values, and he thought that the kind of perfect state of being was nature and a kind of natural rule. So that could be interesting, and I think it's maybe going to be more entertaining than just reading the book of the Tao Te Ching. Book of Zhuangzi. It's got some Chinese fables that inform you about Taoist philosophy. Next up, I recommend this one just because I think that it's a book that will surprise you, and it might take a bit of time. This is really right on the cusp of how many pages, but it's Beowulf, translated by Seamus Heaney. It is exactly 100 pages, so I am sorry if it is using up all of your night to read it, but I did make a video talking about Beowulf and about how much I loved reading it and about how much I was surprised reading it. I love finding those classic books that not only meet the expectations but feel like they exceed the expectations, and Beowulf was definitely one of them. Another one that's on my radar but I haven't yet read is The Green Knight. I have Tolkien's translation. Next up, still another novel, but this is a novel written in verse, where this is the kind of the shifting hue. We're fading into the poetry section now. Another book that I've made a video on is Anne Carson's Autobiography of Red. Although this technically is 150 pages, the lines of the page, it's not a full page, it's written in verse, and so I would say you'll spend about a minute reading each page, which means it'll be about 2.5 hours of reading. Again, I've made a video about it. Specifically, I've made a video talking about my inadequacy in talking about it. That's a cool example of still technically a novel, and it's a modern retelling and interpretation of the Heracles and Geryon story from Greek mythology, but that's all I'll say about that. Again, I did make a video already. I have two poetry collections that I recommend and are able to be read in a day. The first one is Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, which, although you probably can't read the complete Leaves of Grass in one day, all I want to recommend is A Song of Myself. It's about 60-70 pages, and I think it is just I talked about it. It was probably my favorite poem that I read in 2023 ? Or was it 2022? I did it in one of my videos, but or I mentioned it in one of my end of year wrap up videos. But I think that Whitman is probably the way to get into poetry if you don't read poetry, because it is there is no rhyme, or it is a free verse, and also Whitman's just got a beautiful way of writing. Oh my gosh, let's pick a random extract that I've highlighted. I believe in those winged purposes and acknowledge red, yellow, white playing within me, and consider green and violet and the tuft crown intentional, and do not call the tortoise unworthy because she is not something else, and the jay in the woods never studied the gamut, yet trills pretty well to me, and the look of the bay mare shames silliness out of me. The wild gander leads his flock through the cool night. Yahonk, he says, and sounds it down to me like an invitation. The pert may suppose it meaningless, but I listen close, find its purpose and place up there towards the wintry sky. Leaves of Grass, Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. You can read this in a day, and I highly recommend it. Okay, in this last section, we're going to talk about essays, and these are essays that I think you can read in a day, and they will just generally be either entertaining or there'll be some intellectual fodder that you can kind of stew on. The first one and the only specific essay that I'm going to recommend is David Foster Wallace, Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again. I recommend reading the title essay, which is again pretty close to the limit. It's about 100 pages, and it is Wallace's experience being on a luxury cruise liner. It might be fair to say that that's the thing of his that most people have read, since there's obviously the barrier of reading Infinite Jest with how long it is. But if you want really Wallace at his non-fiction prime, of course there's other interesting essays like Authority and American Usage and E Unibus Plurum, but I think in terms of just what's charming about David Foster Wallace and the way that he observes and just is absurdly detailed about mundane everyday things in life, I think that A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again is the essay that you should check out from him in order to get a taste of that. And it will still introduce you to some ideas of can you be so taken care of to the point that it is just it infantilizes you, and just a lot of fun, entertaining anecdotes and ideas show up in this essay that I really recommend. Okay, and for the last category, this is not a specific essay, but I actually recommend just reading essays, journals, tidbits, whatever, on things that you're interested in, or hobbies, maybe even your career. And why I recommend that is that I think that for a lot of people, there's this sense of, even for people who don't read a lot, I think that the popularity of the video essay kind of indicates that a lot of people experience depth about things in the world, but don't necessarily have the language or the right vocabulary to contextualize the way that they're feeling. And what I think can be interesting is that essays really do unlock that for you. A lot of the time, what I love about an essay is that I'll find an essay by an author and I just think, I never would have even thought to make those connections, and I really admire the mind intellectually for making that, or for making those connections. But then there are times where I think, when you're watching an advertisement and it's okay, why is it that the car that they're selling is being driven by a person who's beautiful, really beautiful? Are they selling cars to beautiful people, or are they trying to tell me that I'd be beautiful if I bought this car? What's going on there? And you can tell, that you feel something more than just the textual presentation. It's not just buy this car, but you don't exactly have the vocabulary for describing what it is that you're feeling. Well, someone who does have that vocabulary is Roland Barthes, and in mythologies he talks about things like this, and he talks about how giving toys to kids makes them takes away this idea of creativity, because they're already being presented with constructed, ready-made representations of the adult world and not fundamental building blocks to build up things. And even worse so when dolls are given to young girls and it's already informing the limitations and what they will, the expectations of how they will grow up. You will read these essays and you will know, oh, I knew this, but I didn't know how to say it. And for me, that is the best part about reading non-fiction is I knew this, but I didn't know how to say it. why is it that sometimes when you look at a photo, you feel like that's the subject of the photo, but that's the thing that's sticking with me? And why am I using the word stick with me? Like, why do we use that word? Well, also Barth knows why we use that word, and he talks about it in his book Camera Lucida, where he's talking about photography, and he talks about the punctum, or the kind of fundamental thing that pierces you when you're looking at a photograph. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be Roland Barthes. Borges, if you're interested in mythology, and if you're interested in Kabbalistic traditions, if you're interested seemingly in anything, Borges already talked about it, and he talked about it in his Total Library, the non-fictions. There are so many essays. Borges is someone who, it verges on being, I didn't really know how you could think about this, or how a person could have made these connections. Also with me, being a musician, and especially when your hobby is an artistic thing where you don't necessarily want to spoil the poetry of the thing by dissecting it, spoil it. Use your kind of intellectual interest to dive deeper. Read essays about jazz music from Ralph Ellison. I just recommend thinking about what topics, or what themes, or what areas you're actually interested in, and finding some essays that are going to kind of help reveal hidden layers and contextualize feelings that you already have, but you don't know how to describe. Another example, of course, that us YouTubers are very well aware of, is this idea of authenticity, and how I know that I'm presenting a character to you when I am making a video, but why do I feel okay with that? And B, why is it okay when we see that in other people? And so then learning about Hans-Georg Müller, who also has a YouTube channel, and he talks about prophilicity and this concept of genuine pretending, it just unlocks and it contextualizes a lot of things. And so, yeah, one way that you can do that, though, it can't exactly be, you can't exactly Google, what are the essays that are going to reveal to me the things that I already know but don't quite know how to describe? The easiest way to do that is to talk to people, and to get some friends, go to a bookstore, ask for recommendations, or engage with comment sections when you have YouTubers or videos that you're watching. But yeah, that's my kind of final recommendation, and I'll wrap the video up from here, is just to say, seek out and look for essays in topics and areas that you already know about and are already interested in. And those are, I think, the one-day reading experiences that you can have. Thank you for watching and for tolerating my kind of rant at the beginning of the video. I hope you enjoyed. Please give me your one-day reading experiences, whether or not it's a full book or just a part of a book. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.